Well, I think that, my relationship with trees, right? And
Yeah.
I look at trees and we can learn a lot from trees, right? Trees are highly evolved organisms, much like humans, right? And, I studied plant healthcare for 40 years plus, right? And plant healthcare is how do you keep plants healthy, right? And it's very similar
Mm.
to humans, right? So trees need strong roots. Without roots, nothing grows, right? So you got to have strong roots because they anchor you, they nourish you, right? From the strong roots to the feeder
Mm.
roots that you provide the nutrients and the liquids, the water, right?
Welcome to the CoachMD podcast. I'm Dr. Charles Glassman, bringing you 3 decades of experience as a physician and a coach. Join us as we navigate the maze of medical advice with real-life stories, empowering you to take charge of your health. In our That Happens segment, guests share transformative experiences, reminding us that we're all human and not just patients. So get ready for a journey into healthcare reimagined, where empowerment and discovery pave the way. Hey, I'm Dr. Charles Glassman, aka CoachMD. In my over 30 years of medical practice, I made it my goal to help people create a strong mind, a healthy body, and an unshakable spirit. In this episode of the CoachMD podcast, and thank you so much for joining us, I'm going to be talking with a dear friend of mine, a buddy of mine, John. And John and I, we met years ago when our kids were young. They were playing little league, rookie leagues, and who knew when I volunteered to be a manager of this team that I would meet such lifelong friends, and John is one of them. And the funny thing about me and John is that over the years, as our kids saw us hanging out together, they used to refer to it as John and I were having a play date, because that's what they referred to when they when they hung out with their friends. And John, our play dates would be, swimming or golf or skiing or whatever. And in fact, John's background today, I recognize it, is a place in Vermont, which is a beautiful place on a lake, which serves as great winter and summertime activities for us. And I greatly appreciate John as a friend, a dear friend, and a brother. And what and I are going to talk about today has a lot to do with really what's dear to my heart, and that's really about being a doctor and what it is about being a doctor, about having a medical practice. And as I've said over and over again, is that my goal when I was a doctor, of course, as I said in the intro, help people develop a strong mind, a healthy body, and unshakable spirit, because we are all of those things. But it was never my goal to take care of people. I never felt comfortable with that term. Oh, my doctor takes care of me, or oh, what do you like about being a doctor? And many doctors say, oh, I like to take care of people. Well, my mission was to help give people the knowledge to empower themselves to take care of themselves. Instead of the doctor taking care of them, we have the knowledge and the expertise. But so John and I, not only are we friends, but John became a patient of mine, and I'm going to go into that a little in a little while. But how that developed, how I developed that practice. But I had a practice that was called a concierge practice or a boutique practice. Some of the naysayers and some of our critics would call it a boutique practice, to kind of give it that feel that it was exclusive to only the well-to-do, whatever. But my patient class was very all demographics, and it's about people who really felt that their bodies were important to them, enough their bodies, and they learned later their mind and spirit we could also address, but they felt that it was a good value because it was important for them to take care of that. So John became a patient of mine in that practice. And John, if you could just kind of tell us a little bit about your kind of history with doctors in the past, and what made you, not only because certainly I was a friend, but I think it was more than just that, what attracted you to that type of practice, that personalized concierge practice. And I'll explain what that means in a second. Well, I think John will kind of also in what he says will kind of give you an idea what that is.
Yeah, so Charlie, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure. As you said, we've been friends a long time, and I cherish and value that. I going back listening to you talk about our kids playing sports. I mean, that's really the genesis of our relationship. But then, it evolved into us doing so much in sports ourselves, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so, my history with doctors goes back to when I was involved with a bad car crash. And you and I have had this conversation. And
yeah.
when literally I, was in a car crash and the car was split in half, and I had a near death experience. I died on the street, and so, having had my body torn apart like that, and all sorts of challenges, I was going to see doctors for a long time,
Mm.
and for years and years and years. So we could talk a little bit about, the near-death experience, but
Which we
you asked the
will,
question,
but not
you talked
now.
about
Yeah.
the doctors, and so really the doctors, I was going to see a chiropractor, I was going to see a physical therapist. We're talking for decades,
Mm.
and it didn't seem like I was getting better. So, when I approached you, I was at a point in my life where I kind of had it with, I guess it's called the white coat syndrome, right? You go
Right.
from doctor to doctor to doctor, and really no one can figure out what's going on. So, when you opened up the concierge practice, I thought that was a unique opportunity to have a relationship. I mean, we were already friends,
Yeah.
right? But here's an opportunity to have a relationship with your doctor, and get to know one another on a more personal level. And it's not, 7 minutes here, in and out, fill out this form, fill out that form, and out you go to the next one where you're seeing, 40, 50 people a day.
Hmm.
And so that, it's unsustainable. It's not really at this point ethical, in my mind. I
Yeah.
think that patients deserve, a better experience. And so that's really the genesis of, I think, why I came to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of sums it up and kind of why I went into the practice that I did, because it was a 2 consecutive Mondays in March of 20 in March of 2002. March of 2002, 2 consecutive Mondays where I left my office crying, literally crying. The first Monday was terrible. I had seen maybe 45 patients that day, and
45.
45, yeah, 45 patients. And the last patient was in the last room and had been waiting probably 2 hours.
Oh my
And I
God.
opened the door and I said to her, "Oh, thank you so much for your patience. I'm so sorry." And she wanted to hear nothing of that. She screamed at me and left the office. She waited there just to chew me out. So that was the one thing. And the second time was um, the next Monday, similarly, I don't know, maybe 40, 45 patients, but there was a patient who we had seen a couple, six or I don't know, 6 or 8 months before that, who had a very went to the hospital with an aneurysm, whatever, and basically his wife had came to the office requesting that we give them all the records, and we know what that means. They're looking to sue, right? And that was like a dagger in the chest, but it never transpired to anything. But that's beside the point. I went home crying. I drove home crying that day, and a few days later, and this is how, and when we talk about mind, body, and spirit and our faith, which we'll talk a lot about in a little while, um, across my desk came a New England Journal article about these new practices that were cropping up. And I thought I was calling one of those practices when I called the number in the article, but it was actually a company that helps doctors set up these special practices where you have a very small amount of patients, and that you get to spend much time, but those patients pay you a retainer. And I knew nothing about that, but 8 months later, my partner at the time and I became the ninth and 10th doctors in the country to form one of these practices, and the first in New York State. So before that, I had been practicing for a little over 10 years, well, actually more than that, about 13 years. And it was progressively getting more difficult, and difficult for the patients and the doctor. I'm not saying it was easy for the patients, and I don't, that's why I like this kind of concierge, this type of practice, because it allows doctors to take the time and to really
Yeah.
get to know their patients. And
Yep.
as John was discussing, I really didn't want it to be the same old, meaning I didn't want to just have less patients, but treat them the same way and have the idea that I'm going to take care of them. I really wanted to get to know them on an intimate basis. So John will tell you, he doesn't have to tell you the exact diagnosis, but after we talked and were able to, there was a time when something that you were feeling in your body, we actually were able to pinpoint. Wasn't that early on, I think, when you first started coming to see me?
Yeah, yeah, and we shifted gears a little bit. I changed, some of my treatments and that kind of stuff. I went to a new physical therapist, and I started doing some nutrition stuff. So all those things, helped me to refocus and start to move past some of that history, and just, the fact that if you have a doctor, besides you being my friend,
Yeah.
and I was able to call you pretty much at any time and say, I'm having this issue, that issue. And you'd pick up the phone and say, hey, look, let's try this, let's try that. And the thing that I liked the most was that, you were always open to alternative treatments. It wasn't just try this drug, we'll try that drug.
Yeah.
People say that, medical practice is a practice, right? Because the doctors are
Right.
practicing on your
Right.
patients.
Right.
Right. So try this, try that, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Let's practice on you. So, I think that the fact that you're willing to try alternative treatments and therapies, all the things you and I have talked about forever and ever, right? Faith, prayer, nutrition, yoga, saunas, exercise, meditation, all of those things that have, such an impact on your health that have nothing to do with, taking this drug or that drug.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, yeah, in my practice, I really wanted to uh, embody or convey what I do personally. And most doctors don't like to take medications, honestly. Most doctors don't want to do a lot of the treatments that they recommend their patients to do. So, John and I, not only being friends, it's, when you have a practice like this, it becomes a family. When I stopped the practice
Yeah,
back in 2019 um, to pursue other areas, including this, um, it was tough, and it's because I used to tell my wife that she has a whole family,
that's right.
that I have a whole family she doesn't even know about. I
She
mean,
can't know about them.
exactly. John, she knows John, but there's
Right.
other people in that practice for the family. And when we had a going away reception for me, people were coming up to her crying and saying that, they're going to miss me so much. And that's because they felt like they were losing a family member. And I'm only saying that, not that I'm so great or whatever, but it just, it showed me it was time for me to move on, because having that responsibility of having all that family, just think of yourself when somebody in your family gets sick, how hard that is. Think about as a type of practice that I had, several hundred patients were family members. Obviously there was going to be a lot of trauma, along the way, with people getting sick, death and dying, and all sorts of things.
That's
And
right.
it was,
People don't call you when they're feeling great.
there
People
you
will call you,
go.
right. They call you
Exactly.
when they have a problem.
Right, right. And so that was, that would told me it was time for me to move on. But having John, take having a friend respect me put that trust in me as a doctor, and it being a two-way street. And so, what a couple of the things that, if you feel comfortable discussing it, John, there was a time, and when we were exercising together, actually, John, I always joke around, he created a monster because he was always telling me to join him with this type of exercise, which was CrossFit. And I said, I don't have time for that. I don't have time. But one day I said, okay, I'm going to make time for this. And I did. And now I haven't looked back. It's like I said, he's created a monster. But
Wasn't that at first when we were in Ramsey at first when
yes,
yeah,
yes, at the
we did that
K-Fit.
first, yeah, at K-Fit, right?
And that was the physical therapy that you were doing, which was out of the box
That
physical
was
therapy, right? And
absolutely,
you still
yeah.
do that, right? You could tell us a little bit about
I
that.
still do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Connect PT, in Ramsey, and they're a great place. And the owner, Evan, he's a magician. He's a wizard. And so he was watching me progress and said, maybe we should do something where instead of just doing physical therapy, we transition you into personal training. And I was
Mhm.
like, that's not only smart for me, but I think it's smart for your business. There's going to be, I think, many people like me who want to get out of the physical therapy and into the next step, which would be personal training, right? Under the
Mhm.
auspices of a physical therapist. So they can watch you, they can make sure you're not going to hurt yourself. So Evan said, why don't we try it? So he created a little financial incentive, and we started doing it. I invited Charlie and a couple other guys and some
But I
friends.
turned him down a million times, but
You
go ahead.
did. And but then we started going
Yeah.
and
Oh man.
it
Yeah.
was really, really great. It was really special. Unfortunately, financially, it didn't work out for Evan, but we were able to then move and shift to CrossFit
Yep.
and started doing that as well. And you're still doing that. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm doing other stuff because
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's just I got hurt a couple of times and I didn't want to do that anymore. But
Yeah. Right.
hey, look, I did create a monster. So
Right. Yeah, but it's fun, and John and I, as a typical, tell us what, like, so in the past you go to a doctor and you said you'd been in and out. Tell us a typical, if you come in for a physical with me when we used to do physicals, um, what was that like? Is the first time we did that, what was kind of your, and we don't have to go to details, obviously, of the
right.
specific, because there's a couple things in the physical exam which we will not talk about. But
Well, thank
but
God. Right.
yes, right. But there's, as far as like sitting down and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, the holistic approach, right? I think that first of all, the battery of tests that we did, to go through, it was extensive and intensive. You go through everything, from your heart to your lungs to your EKG, all that stuff. You're checking everything, hearing, and just making sure that all the parts are working like they should. But then there's also, what's going on in your life. Tell me about your stress level. What are you eating? How much you exercising? Where's your faith? How do you relieve stress?
Mm,
All those things that very few doctors have ever asked me.
yeah.
And so then you take into account all those things, and you look at it from a more holistic perspective. You get a better idea of the person as a whole and what they're going through. So we all know now that, right, stress is tied to sickness, right? And so how do we combat that? Well, one of the ways is that we discover what's the underlying cause, right? So what's causing you stress? And so I'll go to the situation where you'll remember, Charlie, when I was doing the sound for our local church,
Yes.
and it was around Christmas, and the sound and the video, there's 300 or 400 people in the church, and I'm responsible for the sound and the video and all the music and that stuff being projected up, and the sheet, all of the words and everything on the screen. And like on Christmas Eve service with hundreds of people, the video
Mm,
crashes, right? And so I was able to get it back up and running, but the stress was through the roof. And I called you that evening and I said, I don't feel well. Um, and you said, come right over. It was a Sunday, and I remember coming over to your house,
Right.
and you put a stethoscope to my chest, and you said, you're going to the hospital tomorrow. You're in full arrhythmia. And
Yeah.
so, just having know my history of what I'd been through, and then also, some of the stuff that I was doing, and what might be causing that stress, and then, being willing and able to see me, like that on a moment's notice, and then being able to say, look, you're in trouble. You need to do something immediately. So I remember you prescribed some medication for me to help with my heart. And we also talked about, meditation and exercise and stress relief. And
Yeah.
so through that, I was able to get off the medication and just go with prayer and meditation. And now my arrhythmia is gone.
Yep.
I think it's 4 or 5 years later, and I have no signs of it. There's absolutely I haven't had any relapse or for recourse. And so, that's a success story, right? Because,
Yeah.
with not only were you able to diagnose it and we were able to try to, work through it, we eliminated the medication, which in my mind is a huge part. I don't want to be on drugs for the rest of my life. I mean, granted, there are times that we have to take medication,
Yeah.
right? But
Sure.
ultimately, God is the ultimate healer, right? So God's the one who's going to heal us. We have to listen, and also listen to the doctors and the experts when
Hmm.
when it's time to take medicine. You may have to take it, and then get off of it as fast as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. And, one of the things that, that's very difficult. And, we talk and I was a I was a practicing physician for many years. And some of the talk I have with my guests, it sounds as though I'm critical of my colleagues and dumping on them. But, I was in the trenches. I know what it's like before I switched practices. And, what John is saying about staying on medication and not being able to get off of it, I know how that is, because when you're seeing so many patients a day, you don't have time really to do what John and I did, sit down and talk about what's really going on and how to maybe titrate or to really treat the root cause. Now, there are doctors all over the place who say, "Oh, the root cause is in the physical." A lot of times, the root cause is not in the physical. The root cause is in the emotional, is in the psychological, is in what's causing the stress. And unless you have the ability to sift through all that and talk about it with somebody to really get at the root cause, and I just it came to mind that a patient of mine once, not John, but this person was being asked to he was actually recruited to get his dream job. And before he got his dream job, he started getting panic attacks, and he came into my office asking me for Xanax, which is a tranquilizer, or it's called a benzodiazepine, or something to calm him down. And so the Xanax, praise the Lamb, uh, yeah, sure, I could give you that as a Band-Aid, but I wanted to know what was really going on. And he told me about he was offered his dream job. And we kind of, going through some of the stuff I worked through in my book, Brain Drain, or Fake News Stories by Your Brain, is that it was a danger to him. It was a dream job, but it was a danger. And the danger was, in his mind, would I be worthy enough? Would I be able to do it? So what the brain does to us when we have a danger like that, we fight and flee. And the panic attack was that reaction. It was causing him to fight or flee away from that. So we talked through it. He took Xanax occasionally, and totally got off it when he took the job and realized that he was totally worthy, stepped out of his comfort zone, and developed a new comfort zone. And that's one of the things that John and I talk about all the time is, what that automatic brain does to us and how it causes the stress. And, I don't know if there's anything you want to mention about that, or how
Oh,
that,
absolutely. How
yeah.
proud I am of you for writing your books, and and doing all that stuff, it, brings to mind our golf times together,
Oh,
right, Charlie?
yeah.
Right. I mean, so, Charlie and I have been golfing for a little while. I first started golfing with Charlie, oh, I don't know, a while, what is it,
Yeah,
about nine
probably
years,
more than 10 years ago,
10 years ago? Yeah.
at
And
least. Yeah.
Charlie had never golfed, and I'd been golfing since I was, probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old. And so, I encouraged Charlie to take up golfing.
Oh, God.
So the first couple of years were rough because
Right.
Charlie really hadn't swung a golf club. And so, but we stuck with it. And in my business, I was able to get us out on some golf courses. And so we did some golf, and we had a lot of fun. And for me, it's all about having fun, getting outdoors and having the exercise and being with nature, and swinging a club, and having a conversation with people. So it's not so much about performance as it is about having a good time,
Yeah.
right? So I think that was helpful for Charlie, but it was still not easy. But as he got better and better and better, right? I mean, I could see him progressing. He started taking lessons, and he caught the bug.
Right.
He really he caught,
Right.
he caught the bug, Charlie.
Don't you do that, listeners.
Yeah. So he caught the bug, and now he's taking lessons, and he's all in, and he's got the practice green in his putter in his office, and he's got the chipper in his house, and he's going and he's doing it, and he's taking lessons, and we're going out, and I can see he's getting frustrated, right? And he's starting to get frustrated because now he wants to have, to be able to perform, to hit the ball, and it's not so much about having fun anymore. It's more about, performance, and having,
Right.
capability, and having technique and all that stuff. And so, and then you said you told me you wanted to quit. And I said, no, Charlie, did you read the book, The Brain Drain? I think you wrote that book. So why don't you read the chapters again
Oh, I
and go
love it.
back? And so I encouraged you, and you stuck it out. So I give
Yeah.
you tons of credit. And we still golf again. We
Oh,
golf a
yeah.
lot. And
Can't
so,
wait. Yeah.
but I couldn't, I was,
Yeah.
aghast that you were thinking of
Right.
quitting.
Right.
And
Right.
it was so ironic that I had to, remind you of what you had written in your book.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I want you to also because there's something that you used to always tell me about how to learn golf, and you were a psychology major in college, and there were four principles that if you can pull them up off the top of
Yeah.
your head, that
Is that
really
the four stages of learning?
first stage of learning, and that was very important for me, and I put that in my book, Fake News Stories by Your Brain. I have that in there, and if you could just tell our listeners a little bit
Yeah.
about
So
that.
there's four stages of learning, right? The first is unconscious incompetence, and
And
that's where you don't know that you don't know.
right.
And so you have no idea that it's just out of your universe. You don't even know that you don't know. It's out there. It's just something you never even thought of. And so no learning occurs at that stage. The second stage um, is conscious competence, right? I'm sorry, conscious incompetence.
Right.
Conscious incompetence is where you know that you don't know, right? So something, for instance, that you take up for the first time, like golf per se,
Yeah.
right? And now you're a conscious incompetent, meaning
Right.
that I
Very
know, but I
incompetent.
know that I don't know, right? And it seems
Right.
funny to say that, right? A conscious incompetent.
No,
But
but
that's actually the first stage at which learning can occur.
you have to be
Because,
honest with yourself, right? And you have to be a
yeah,
little bit introspective, right?
right. And you have to say, I know that I don't know, and I want to learn. So that's when, the fact that you want to learn is the first stage in learning. And then the third stage is conscious competence. And that's where most of us are in most of our lives, where we have to, think things through and be conscious about it and do it by step by step by step, right? And so, golfing or riding a bike or driving a car is probably a better example, because when you first learn, right, you just have to do it over and over and over and over again, right? Sit on the seat and pedal the pedals, or sit in the driver's car and start the engine, turn the signal, back it up, all those things, those little pieces that you have to piece together over and over and over until you become conscious competence, where you do it but you have to think through it. And
Hmm.
then after you've done it 10,000 times, you become, an unconscious competent, where you can just do it without thinking about it. And so that's where we all want to get, right? With most of us who drive cars, that you're conscious, you're a conscious, competent,
Incompetent. I mean, competent.
unconscious
Right, right,
competent,
right, right.
right? Because you can just do it without thinking about it. And the rest, things like golf, we hope to get there one day.
Yeah.
But that people like, Tiger Woods, who are their unconscious competence, but
Yeah.
very few of us will be able to get to that in the game of golf.
Right, right. And that's, that's a goal that it can just be a reflex. And unfortunately, in what sabotages a lot of it sabotages us in life is that idea that it's unconscious competence, but we're competent in the wrong things. We're competent in sabotaging ourselves. So it's
Mhm.
almost, I call the automatic brain, it's an automatic reflex
Right,
to whenever something comes from, that affects us, it makes us withdraw, it makes us fight or flee. And we don't really, it's unconscious,
right.
but it's
Just happen.
automatic.
Right,
We want to be unconscious, like you're saying, we want to reach uh, a place in our life where there are things that we want to master. We want to be successful in life. We want to have be mastery of life, and this is what we want that to happen. Unfortunately, the other thing happens more, more. And but yeah, John, when John told me that, I said, wow, because I had never learned that. And I just thought it was so perfect. It was definitely perfect for golf, but obviously it's perfect for learning in general and life in general. And, I'm going to backtrack a little bit about what we were talking about, where it sounds like sometimes I'm bashing doctors. But I want you to get a picture of what it was like before, I transitioned, before a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about here with John, we kind of, this came about in our office. Sure, we're friends and we socialize and we hang out together, but a lot of this started with us just sitting across a doctor's table, just BSing about things because we had the time to do it. But in my earlier, before I did this, just seeing one patient after the other, um, it just was so just so toxic, and toxic for the person, the patient. And when I transitioned to the concierge practice, a lot of my patients, they said to me that they didn't why should I pay extra? Because you always did that anyway. And I didn't know where they were coming from, because I know I didn't do it. Maybe because I made eye contact and I sat down, but those visits were no more than 5 to 7 minutes. I can guarantee you that, when there
right.
are stacks of charts. And I remember one time, and this kind of encapsulates the stress that doctors are under, seeing all those patients. I had already seen maybe 25 patients that day, and it was only, probably, the day was only half to, 2/3 over. And a gentleman walked into my office. He was in his mid 50s. He was a new patient, clearly out of shape, and just not healthy, just did not look healthy. And most doctors can kind of get that sense, and the very first thought I had, honest to God, was, oh, gee, now he's my responsibility.
I
Anything
think
that happens from
I
now
remember.
on, what's
Yeah, you
that?
remember telling me that story.
Yeah, whatever happens from now on is going to be on me. If he has a heart attack when he walks out the door, they're going to blame me. If something happens, a month from now, they're going to blame me. And I know that doctors who are under the gun now, and it's even harder now because now doctors are employees. Before, that was my practice. I was with a partner. We owned that practice. It was, we had skin in the game, if you will. But now
Yeah,
doctors are working for corporations, hospitals, corporations, and they're told that they have to see a certain number of patients a day. They get incentives, bonuses if they see certain, over that, whatever. And I don't look. Again, I'm not bashing, but it's not a healthy, it's not a healthy system. It
No,
really isn't.
no.
And so John and I were fortunate that we could uh, interact and get to know one another, and I could be his doctor in this intimate kind of medical relationship. If John came to me uh, before that, it would have been a little contentious, I think, because I would want to, he was my friend. I wanted to spend time and talk with him and whatever and catch up, but that wouldn't have happened. I'd have to, somehow make it so I am spending time, but I'm not really spending time. And so I feel for my colleagues, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And so I don't, but doctors, the bottom line is, you know, you can't talk about anything but the one thing that you came in for. And that one thing that you came in for, like the gentleman who was anxious in my old practice, I would have just, or having panic attacks in my old practice, I would have given him the Xanax. I would have just given
Nice.
it to him. I wouldn't have questioned it. I would have given it to him. He would have left the door. He would have come back to me. And it wouldn't have, I don't know if he would have taken the job, but that didn't happen. So, the thing that really made my practice special and my relationship like with people like John is that I was able now to take a step back and to say, look, we're not just a body. And as I said in my opening, my goal was to help people be strong in mind, body, and spirit. And that spiritual part and that mind part, because in my books I talk about the difference between the brain and the mind. And the mindfulness, to me, the mind is really our connection with our divine nature, our spiritual nature. And that spiritual nature speaks to us through our mind rather than our automatic primitive animal brain. And so John and I were able to have discussions about our faiths, our deep belief in God. And I know John is very grounded in his Christian faith. And my Jewish faith, if you will, but it's really the same faith, okay, as I talked about in an earlier podcast, and maybe talk a little bit about that today, a little bit more. But it's very important to us. And we used to, in with Tub or whatever, I used to have these talks and still do. And I remember saying to John that I don't know where I'd be today if I didn't have a strong belief and trust in God. And that was something that John can talk about easily because John has a very strong faith. And I want you and that maybe tell the listeners a little bit about how your faith, first of all, your faith journey, maybe how it started. And I also wanted you to maybe talk about your near-death experience and how that had something, how that influenced you in your, if it did, in your faith. And just if you could just kind of take us back, because this, this, this carries through our life. And this affects our body, and this affects how we deal with the world, and how things, even illnesses can occur, whatever. But why don't you, I'll give you the floor, John. Talk us a little bit about that, your
Yeah,
faith
thanks,
journey.
Charlie. And thanks for
Yeah.
those kind words. Yeah, no, I've been very blessed, to have a strong Christian upbringing. My mother would go to church, she sang in the choir, and so we were in church pretty much every Sunday. And so that was kind of my, the beginning. And so when I, was 18, I kind of drifted away from my faith and doing the crazy stuff that 18-year-olds
Yeah.
do,
Right.
not good stuff, and getting in trouble. And so went away to college and, all that stuff. But I had people in the church who loved me and kept writing to me and sending me packages and saying, come back anytime you're welcome. And one day I forget when it was in my 20s, and I had had my near death experience. And the near death experience was, I was in a bad car crash, and you know it it's it's incredible. Everyone's near-death experience is different, right? But mine had a lot of similarities to what you see in the movies and you hear in the books, where you're above your body, and I was looking down on the car crash, and I was able to see my body and everyone around it, and the emergency service vehicles, and the car split in half and all that stuff. And I could see my friends looking down at me, and that I was, I had gone, I was dead, I wasn't breathing, I was unconscious. And so I'm looking down on this site, and and immediately I'm taken up, and I feel the warmth, I see the light, and I feel God's presence, and it's wonderful, it's amazing, it's indescribable, really. There's no words really to describe it, but you just feel this love that's endless and boundless. It's just relentless. And you start going to the light, you go to the warmth, and I'm feeling, this beauty that's like surpasses all understanding. But I'm basically told that it's not your time. It's not your time. You need to go back. And so in that instant, that, next thing I know, instead of looking down on my body, I'm now looking up, and my friends are looking down at me, and they're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. He's alive." Because I hadn't been breathing. And so that changes everything, right? You know that there's something on the other side, right? And it's not to be feared, and it's love, and it's God. And so for us as Christians, we know that Jesus has saved us, and that we're going to be with him when we die, and that's nothing to be afraid of. So we can go about our lives as a renewed person, right? So we're spiritual beings in this physical world, right? And so God put me back on this planet for a reason, and the rest of my life is now working towards figuring out what that is. And I believe that a lot of that is service, right? So how do we serve others? How do we help others, right? And if you think you're having a rough day, I can guarantee you there's people out there who are having even rougher days, right? So if you ever feel like you're down or depressed, or you're having a hard time, God's going to put people in front of you who you can serve. And realize that the pain and suffering that you're going through is really God's way of drawing you to him, and using that to humble you, to make you draw to him and rely on God and not on yourself. Because ultimately, right, God, we didn't make ourselves, right? We when we were knit in our mother's womb, right, that was God's doing. We didn't create ourselves. And so God has a part to play in our lives. And so for those of us who have faith, it's easier, right? Because we know what's to come. For those, like you said, who don't have faith, I can't imagine what it's like. And I feel sorry, I feel bad for people who struggle with faith, because without faith, life can seem hopeless. So I encourage our listeners to, if you're in a church or a synagogue, temple, whatever, to participate, right? To do that, to go there, to be there. How lucky am I to not only have Charlie Glassman as my doctor and my friend, but also my pastor, for my church, is my friend, and we go out socially with him. My attorney is one of my best friends, right? So, like, jokingly, we went out for, last couple of weeks ago, we went out for a concert together, right? So I'm with my pastor, my doctor, and my attorney. So I got all the bases covered, right?
Right.
But I mean, really, like, you need to have your faith near you at all times. And just the other day, I went to a spiritual healing with my pastor, and it was amazing. It was, extremely difficult. Going through the past, all the things that have happened to you, or that you have done, and then, seeking, acknowledging those things, and then, seeking forgiveness, and then repenting, right? And repent means really to turn and go in another direction. So, that is so freeing, right? To have that weight lifted off your
Mm,
shoulders, right? And so that's where healing starts, right? So all the physical ailments, you can't be healed until you heal the spiritual piece, right? So for me, that's just been an incredible journey. I feel so blessed, to have had, my mother to help me and raise me with that faith, but then also to rediscover it, through a near-death experience, and then just being a knucklehead when I was in,
right.
college and high school, and then, having someone in the church love me back, and say, come. And so one day
Mm,
I went back to church, and everyone had their arms open, come and sing and pray, and so I've been back in church ever since, and it's really encouraging, and it's a
yeah.
huge part of my life now.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things you said that I want to want to talk to a little bit. When you had the near-death experience and you were sent back, and you said that, now uh, everything that happens from this point on is something that uh, is meant to happen, or that you're meant for something. And I look about that people who haven't died. Okay, let's say you have an experience in life where there's a period, and we say when there's a period, don't make it a question mark. Right?
Mhm.
When something ends, right? When something ends, and you make a decision, or you don't make a decision and just ends, and you're bemoaning it, and you're feeling bad about it, whatever. But the reality is that nothing that happens from that point on would have happened if there wasn't that period placed.
That's right.
So if John died, obviously none of this would have happened. But when he came back, everything that happened after that was would have never happened. So it's very special. And that's an important thing to recognize whenever there's a period. Don't make it a question mark, and just move on, and just
And
realize that
miracles happen all the time, Charlie.
all the time. And we
All the
talk,
time, if
right,
you open
right.
your eyes and you listen, there's no coincidences. These little things that happen where God puts people in your path, or you in their path, and the next thing you know, like, lives are changed. Those aren't coincidences. That's a
Yeah,
God wink.
yeah, yeah. And of course, what I called that in the past was daily magic, and we
Yes.
we we always
Yeah.
had that. And that was from my book Brain Drain. I do talk about it a little bit now, but I think about it a little bit differently than I did. But I also, yeah, these are things that I agree with John, that are inexplicable, that have the idea of changing. And the near death experience is one of those things. Okay, that I in my practice, I have, over the years, obviously many patients would die, and I'd be at the deathbed talking to families, and talking to dying patients, and holding their hand, and telling them not to be afraid. But I believe, I've always believed in God, but I didn't believe 100% in God. Okay, I believe in, and unfortunately, many people who have faith, whether it's Jews, Christians, Hindus, Muslims, they have faith, or and other faiths. I'm just mentioning the top four or whatever. Um, they have faith, but do you believe it 100%? And I was talking to these the patients who are dying, and their families, and I'm saying these things, and I'm thinking, well, I'm the kind of person that if I'm going to say these things, I have to know more about it. Are they really going to a different place, or a better place? So that's when I started researching
Yeah.
near-death experiences.
Yep. And we
And
saw that movie too.
yeah, I mean, that went over the University of Virginia and their 50 years of research, and what they've concluded about all these near-death experiences is that they can't explain them. And but they don't know what it is. They're not taking a stance whether it's God, whether it's not. They're just saying they can't explain them. But to me, that slams the book shut. And there are a lot of people who were talking about the dying brain, and Neil deGrasse Tyson. I was very disappointed to hear an interview with him when someone asked him about near-death experience, he says, "Oh, come on, why does everybody see a light?" And there was quiet. He was waiting for them to answer. It's kind of a rhetorical question. Nobody knew what he was going to say. Well, why do they always see light? Because it always happens on the operating table and there's big operating lights. That's far from the truth.
Right.
That's far from the truth. These things occasionally happen operating. I could tell you a bunch of stories that I've read and learned about from other doctors, but for the most part, they happen, like John's saying, in a car crash or some other circumstance. So to me, that is so powerful. And it's important to understand that there are certain things we have control over in our life. So we can control our health by exercise, by diet, by healthy living, if you will, avoiding toxins, cigarettes, alcohol, whatever, and having good relationships. But there are certain things that are out of our control. And those things that are out of our control, if you don't have that faith, unfortunately, many of those, like I said, that the big religions are atheists. They don't believe in God, or they don't believe 100%. If you can trust 100%, that's kind of the benchmark, because it's either true or it's not true, right? I mean, somebody had a near-death experience or they didn't have a near-death experience. Okay, there's no in between, right? You either believe them or you don't believe them. But if you do
Right.
believe them, then are you all in believing them that this happened? And if you're all in believing them, then you're all in on understanding that there's something greater than ourselves that is shaping our life and influencing our health. And definitely, I know you feel that way, John, with your body and your health and how you live your life. Um, with certain things and the way you look at coincidences, or, I mean, there's so many. When I started this podcast, the idea I had was to talk about that happened experiences. So when you could take a step back and say, whoa, that really happened. But I realized that most people are not, they haven't recognized these things in their life, but they're happening all the time. All right. That's why I urge people to keep what I call the daily magic journal, but you could call it a God wink journal. You could call it a coincidence journal, but just become aware of those things. Don't get obsessive about it. Okay. Don't start seeing things in the sky and clouds. I'm talking about things that where your paths cross with people who you haven't seen in 30 years or something, whatever. It may not even know the reason why that happened, but it happened. And it's important to kind of take note of that. What do you think about that, John? Is that something you think is beneficial for people to do or helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. I started writing stuff down a couple of years ago, and it's helpful because, look, we're all very busy people, right? So it's helpful to have time on a daily basis to, pray, meditate, journal, whatever, so that you can take some time out from the craziness that's our lives, right? To make it dedicated, carve it out, and to keep it sacred, because that time is when you're going to hear that small voice, right?
Yeah.
When you're going to see those coincidences or those God winks, right? But if you're running around like a crazy person, and you and I had this conversation as well. I think it was 8, maybe 9 years ago. I said, Charlie, what are some of the things I could do to reduce stress? And you said, turn off the TV, don't
Right.
listen to the radio, and stop reading the newspaper.
Right. And you reminded me to stop doing those a number of
I
times.
have, right?
Yes,
And
right.
so I literally took your advice and limited, just turned off all of those things. And it was magical, how the impact that it had on my life. And so I even to this day, I spend very little time on social media unless it's, something that I need to or want to do. I try to be very um deliberate about my time on social media because it is such it's almost addictive, right? It is
Yeah,
addictive.
it is.
They
Well,
do
that's
it
what,
to us on purpose.
exactly. Right.
It's been proven, right? And I don't read the newspapers anymore. I listen to the radio only for music or podcasts or stuff like that. And most of the time I just play the music on my on Spotify or whatever, so that I can create the playlists that I want to
Mm.
hear, and not, and not the music that's jammed down our throats on some radio station. And so a lot of the stuff I will listen to will be Christian, a lot of Christian songs, but also meditative songs. Even study, binaural rhythms, the binaural beats when you're studying, so you can use music to help change your mood, change
Hmm.
your focus, to uplift you, right? To dance, right? Like, what's better than dancing for exercise, and just,
Yeah.
getting your spirit, and singing, right? I mean, I love to sing. And so singing, I used to sing in a choir, and I love to sing. And it's, that again, when you sing, you pray twice. My mom
Yeah.
always told me that.
That's nice. That's nice. I love that. Yeah. Well, that's one of the other activities. John and I like to go out with our wives and the parties and dance. We like to dance. And
True.
but what you're saying about you don't recognize these things, these that happened experiences, these daily magic experiences when we're so burdened. And that's why I know that if you can just take a step back and and just write them down, then you won't forget them. Because when you're burdened by all the things in the world that you can't do anything about, then you're not going to see those things. But when you understand that you focus on the things you can do something about, and that's your immediate home. So so many people are looking to save the world when their own house is a mess. And that's the place that we have the most control over.
And
So,
how many times have you been woken up in the middle of the night by, God, or that small voice or whatever, telling you to, you have to do something, right? And I've told you how it's some of the things in my life have changed my life because of what God said to me in the middle of the night,
right,
right?
pivoted, right.
Even last night, in preparation for, this talk today, he woke me up at 1:30 last night, and I
Mm,
sat for an hour writing stuff down that I wanted to talk with you about, because this is so important, right?
mm,
And as soon as I got all those things written down, boom, I was able to go right back to sleep. But that's like, sometimes, God can't get through to you in the middle of the day because you're too busy. So,
mm.
he'll reach out to you in the middle of the night and say, "Well, I have your attention now." And so some people look at that as insomnia, but it's also, if you just turn that a little bit and say, "Well, that's really the only time God has to talk with me. So I'm going to listen. I'm going to write some stuff down, and then I go back to sleep."
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. Definitely. One thing about sleep, which I've noticed, and one of the things that people can do who do have faith, and this podcast is, look, I'm not trying to convince you to be a certain faith or talk about, I'm just telling you what I believe. Okay. And I have a very strong belief in God, and the God I pray to, I've said, is the same God that John prays to and that Christians pray to, is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay, that's the same God that we pray to in the Judeo-Christian faith. But I'm not saying that you need to pray to that God. I'm not trying to convince you. But what I am saying is that whatever God you pray to, or whatever belief system you hold, if you put 100% into that, it's very difficult to have this automatic brain of yours always in the fight or flight mode. And the thing about sleep is that sleep is one of the most natural processes of our body. It's as natural as breathing. It's as natural as our heartbeat. It's a rhythm that we have. And for most people, there are certain disorders, but for the majority, that's not the case. And when you have that faith, when you will fall asleep, if you have an empty plate, a blank slate, if you will, and just you will fall asleep automatically, right? So if someone of faith dumps everything they have of that, their fight or flight, the dangers that they're feeling, the threats that the vulnerabilities that they're having, you dump all of that on the lap of your faith, and you say to yourself, just, I'm going to let it happen. I'm going to
Let it
let it
go.
happen.
Let
And
it
you
go.
pick, let it go,
Right.
let it happen, let that go, and then let the sleep happen. Just let it happen. And naturally, it's just going to happen. And say that, and envision in your mind a blank slate, either a blank, we have in a whiteboard, or a blank empty tray. I was doing that for a while, empty tray. So being thoughtless. There are some techniques that people talk about where you think about things, you imagine yourself in different places. Sometimes that could be helpful, but I find that if you just dump it on the faith that you have, let it go, and then let it happen. Just let it happen. Tell yourself, I'm going to let it happen. It happens most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time. But yeah, I think that integrating your faith and your trust in that faith can go a long way.
Did
Because
I ever
people,
talk? Did
yeah,
I
go
ever
ahead.
talk to you about the circadian code, Charlie?
I don't think so.
The
No,
book,
I
The
don't.
Circadian
Yeah,
Code.
tell me about it.
Great book. So it's I forget the author, but it's basically tells you that everything is since we've been on this planet, everything has revolved around day night, day night, day night, right? So that our bodies are tuned to the seasons and the day and the night, and being an outdoor person, my history,
Yeah,
so I'm very attuned to what's going on outside, and so that it's super important for healing, for good health, for all these things, to put our lives into these rhythms,
mm,
right? And so they did all these studies about people who operate outside of the people who are night workers, shift workers, all those
yeah,
kinds of things, and all of the medical problems that they have because of
mm,
they've messed up their circadian rhythm. So, but basically they came up with these studies that showed that if you eat at the same time every day, the three meals, whatever it is, or two meals, whatever you have, and you eat them at the same time, and you eat healthy, and that's really, really important. Your sleep, and there's a thing called sleep hygiene, right? It's when do you go to sleep and how long do you sleep for?
yeah,
And so that and it's at the same times so that your body becomes accustomed to those rhythms, right? And it was all back to, when the sun goes down, you go to sleep. But when we introduced artificial light, it changed all that,
mm,
right? And that started to cause a lot of problems. And then so exercise as well. So the three things should all be at the same time of day. The best time to exercise is in the morning. Next best time is in the afternoon, and the least best time is in the evening. But still, evening is better than none.
right.
Right. So all of these things, right? The more that we can get our body into this rhythm, the healthier we're going to be, the easier it's going to be for us to heal ourselves and stay healthy. So great book.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's very interesting because you talk about the circadian rhythms, or the rhythms. Our body, and I talk a lot about this uh, in the idea of the automatic brain, our primitive nature, our animal nature, and all
Right.
animals function this way. Most animals, a lot of animals function this way, and our body will shoot out cortisol, which is a stress hormone. Okay. A stress hormone, which signals to the body to release sugar to get ready to fight or flee. And it will do that at 4 o'clock in the morning and approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So, what happens is many people, when John was talking about, eating at the same time, I've always encouraged people not to eat, either not to eat a breakfast or not to eat a starch-filled breakfast, because your body is already producing that sugar. Your body is going to produce it. So what I do is I fast almost every day from about 8 to 9 o'clock at night to noon the next day, and I'm hardly ever hungry in the morning. And that's because my body's taking care of that. I drink water, and I might have tea, or if I'm working out, I might have a drink that has some powder in it, but is not sugar, not sugary. And it's very important to understand that, because when you're thinking about adjusting, what you're doing, how you're eating, it is. We do have this rhythm, and it's important to acknowledge that. And everyone has it. So why does that cortisol pop out? It's because when we were 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, when we were hunting and gathering, like John said, we'd get up at the crack of dawn. It might have been anywhere from 4 to 7 o'clock in the morning. We needed that burst of energy to go out because you haven't eaten. You probably ate the day before, probably around noon or 1, because the food's not going to sit around all day. So you eat and you consume what you caught or what you gathered. And so if you're going to do that, purely, you have to look at the circadian, and you don't have to do that purely, but just to have the knowledge of that. It's important to not, if you're going to eat a high carb dinner, a high carb meal, you don't do it the first thing in the morning, and you don't do it in the evening, because that's going to interrupt. You can eat at lunchtime. A lot of people complain about that because it makes them sleepy, but that's why people develop the siesta. But there's ways to get around that we don't have to get into. But yeah, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, John. About that circadian rhythm. But yeah, it's really great talking with you. We talk all the time, and I'm going to come tomorrow morning. There's a men's breakfast that I'm going to join you at the John's church that I'm going to. I have so many dear friends who are at that church and who belong to the different groups there. So I'm going to look forward to doing that and really fellowshipping with all the guys. It's going to be fun. A lot of my good pals are there.
I think that's
my brothers.
important. I'd like to just comment on that too as well, Charlie, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the things we do in our church as well is a discipleship, right? And so it's a group of guys and gals, right? Men and women who meet weekly. And I think in this, day and age, that's super important, right? So
Yeah.
it's first of all, it's guys talking with guys and women talking with women about, stuff that's really, personal and deep and confidential, right? And so, I've been blessed to be able to, lead one of the groups with our friend George, and the stuff that we talk about
Mm.
so important. And we become each other's counselors, right? And so we share our life experiences and ups and downs, and we help each other, and we pray for one another, and support one another. And that's so rare
Mm.
this day and age, right?
Yeah.
That's just
It
hardly
is.
ever seen.
No, no, no.
Loneliness is the new cancer, right? That's what
Yeah.
everyone's saying, right? So to have a group of people that you can be with and just,
Mm.
and just bare your soul and tell them everything that's going on, and it's going to be held in strict confidence, and then people are going to love on you and pray for you and help you. We've helped our guys in our groups with all sorts of stuff,
Mm.
emotional,
Yeah.
psychological, financial
Mm-hmm.
burden that we've helped with. And to watch the work in each other's lives, it's just such a blessing. So again, like you said before, when people don't have faith, you also don't have the community, right? Like we
Right. Yeah.
need each other.
Yeah.
We're in this together. Being alone is not healthy. We're social animals. We need each other, and we need to be with people who are like-minded and are positive thinkers and are gonna or they're action oriented. They want to help, they want to do things, they want to volunteer. And that's the other thing, Charlie, I think that really through my life, and you and I have talked about this, and we've
Mm.
done it,
Yeah.
is volunteerism, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, all the things that we've been involved with, and I could think of a school that I helped found, and also the Rotary Club and the church, and the associations, the professional associations that I'm involved with. All those things, right, are so helpful to me because giving back, you realize just how much need there is out there in the world and how blessed we are.
Yeah.
I am. And so when you realize, just how blessed you really are, you have a lot less to complain about.
Yeah.
And, and by helping others, it makes you feel better and lifts
Yeah.
your spirit and heals you, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, yeah, exactly. And that's very important because uh, when we're down and we're down and out, a lot of times we have the posture, our head is down and we're rounded. And I've always encouraged people when they have that feeling to lift up, to stand up straight, and when they cross someone in the street, to greet them and say hello, and to think to themselves that you know God is in everyone or God is in no one. So if you believe, truly believe, you believe that that person who crossed your path, who's maybe feeling down also, that you can shed some light on them. And just by doing that, by doing something good, or helping somebody else who needs a hand, it helps you. And what you're talking about, the fellowship with, I'll talk about the men's, just the men for now. What happens with many guys as we get older? Yeah, we have friends, but what are those friends? We go out drinking with them. We reminisce about the old times as bros, and we go to maybe a bar or a football game, and we're drinking heavy. We're getting drunk. I'm saying I'm doing this, but this can happen with your buddies, with your pals, and really that's escaping life. That's not really endorsing a posture of embracing life. And so these kind of groups, these fellowships are so important. And it's people, are so I know that I'm going to lose viewers when I talk about God and I talk about Christianity or Judaism, but I know that those people, if I lose you, I'm sorry. I hope you come back. But for those people who understand that when you look at somebody like John's talking about, that fellowship, these guys who are coming together and not and talking about really deep stuff, really life stuff, and how there's something greater than ourselves is influencing us. God is influencing those things happening in our life and trying to tap into that something greater. When you're talking about that, it goes beyond. It goes beyond. There's something special about that. And if the Super Bowl, well, this is actually, I'm gonna this broadcast is going to be after the Super Bowl, but so the Super Bowl a few weeks ago, you had two quarterbacks who are young men of faith. And if you look in the sports world, those athletes who have faith, who believe in God, who believe in something greater than themselves, there's something different about them. I don't care. You don't have to, you could be an atheist for all I care. That's fine. I'm not judging you. I'm not telling, I'm not judging you, period. Okay. But there's something different about those guys than the other athletes. All right. And I'm not talking about their prowess. Okay. I'm not talking about their ability to win a game, because there's on both sides, there's people of faith. All right. The losing side and the winning side. I'm talking about their spirit. There's something in their soul that has transformed, that is something different about them just by the way they talk and speak and interact. So this is an important piece of total wellness. It's that spiritual piece. And in order to really embody that spiritual piece and make it grow, you need help. You can't do it on your own. Yeah, sure, there's God helping you, but God wants you to fellowship, wants you to get together. And so for my male audience, I urge you to do that. And of course, my female audience, I urge you to do that as well. So John, it's great talking with you as always, and look forward to hanging out with you, of course, in other times. Very close tomorrow, but tomorrow will be a month ago because this is airing. If you just so that's fine. But yeah, any parting words that you want to leave on everybody, John?
Well, I think that, my relationship with trees, right? And that
Yeah,
nature, right? And
John's
that,
an arborist, and he worked in the industry for many years. Still does. Still does. Yeah.
yeah. So, I look at trees and we can learn a lot from trees, right? Trees are highly evolved organisms, much like humans, right? And, I studied plant healthcare for 40 years plus, right? And plant healthcare is how do you keep plants healthy, right? And that it's very similar
Mm,
to humans, right? So, trees need strong roots. It's the most important piece.
love that. Whoa. Love it.
Without roots, nothing grows, right? So you got to have strong roots because they anchor you, they nourish you, right? From the strong roots to the feeder
Mm,
roots that you provide the nutrients and the liquids, the water, right? So good nutrition is really important. Trees actually feed themselves.
mm.
Like think
Wow.
about that. They
Wow.
feed
Yeah.
themselves, right? So they drop their leaves that decomposes and forms their next food network. They grow up into their own organic matter, which then
Mm,
them, right? Just like highly evolved, right? So they consume lots of water, right? So
mm.
we need to do that, right? They know when to rest. They know when to grow and they know when to rest. And they don't have to think about it.
Wow.
They just do it, right? It's natural. It
Yeah.
just happens, right? They shed their
Mm.
leaves and
Love
it's
that.
time to rest, right? And also grow where you are. Like, right? You're like trees are planted. We move around all over with them, right?
Mm,
But there's something to be said to grow where you,
mm.
right? Know where you're planted and grow where you are, right? So they recycle their parts.
Wow.
Right? They
I
they
love
drop
that.
they drop their parts, they shed their parts, and they recycle them. Like, how cool is that? They make the world a better place.
Wow. Oh, wow. I love that, John. Thank you for sharing that. It brings to mind what I saying that I love. That before you reach for the stars, you have to have both feet planted on the ground. So we all have these a lot of us have these high and mighty dreams, and like I said, saving the world. But you have to have your feet planted on the ground. You have to have your feet planted. I believe in a strong faith, and in your home. Have your feet planted in your home life, your relationships, and it's so important. So thank you for sharing that. I'm glad we
And
got to that. Wow,
have
that
and
was great.
have you heard of the World Wide Web?
Yeah.
Well, it's the Wood Wide Web. So
Oh,
trees share their resources. They
wow.
share fungi. They talk to one another. When one
Mm,
tree's in trouble, they send a message through their roots through a fungus called mycorrhizae
wow.
and tell the other tree, I need help. And the other tree will send resources to the other
Mm,
tree,
love that.
right? It's
Wow.
just like think about that. And they're right thing trees are their beauty and their art. They're
Yeah.
natural, right? And so trees are better with others, and so are we. Be natural, eat clean, right? They compartmentalize wounds.
Mm,
So they
wow.
wall off wounds by growing around them,
Wow. Wow.
right? So we heal wounds, right? At least our physical wounds,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if we cut ourselves, we'll grow around, we'll actually replace those skin cells, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's healing. Trees don't heal, they seal. They
Mm,
seal off. And so there's four walls of sealing that a tree it's called coated compartmentalization of decay in trees, coated. And the
mm,
fourth wall is the wall, it's called wound wood or reaction wood, that's laid down on a wound to cover it over.
mm.
And that's the strongest wood
Wow. Wow.
of all. And so, they're able to do that. And so we've also discovered um with all of the invasive species that are coming and starting to attack our trees, coming from all over the world, and they're just disrupting our trees. The number one defense for all of this stuff is diversity.
Wow.
So trees that have been around for millions and millions of years are highly adapted by evolution to protect themselves.
Mm.
The ginkgo tree. The ginkgo tree has been around since dinosaurs,
Wow.
since the dinosaurs, and they're
Wow.
still here. So, but by having a diverse, like people think, oh, native plants, native trees. But what we've discovered is the more diverse your landscape, the more
Mm.
resilient it is to attack
Wow.
from anything. And
Wow.
so diversity is our strength as well as trees' strength.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much, John, for sharing that with us. And thank you all for joining us on another episode of the CoachMD podcast. As always, I am Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD. I'm so grateful that you took time out in your life to join us. And I'd love to hear from you. So definitely reach out. And if you feel this is worthwhile, share it with friends. I'd love to hear what they have to say as well. And so until next time, I urge you to stay strong in mind, in body, and right here in soul. Bye for now.